Today, we received an announcement from TPCI about the updates for the 2026 Championship Series for the Pokemon trading card game. Now that the NAIC has concluded, there are no more opportunities for players to gain Championship points towards Worlds in 2025, which means we can start turning our attention to the 2026 season and how that's going to be changing, and ultimately how you can make it to San Francisco in August. Local tournaments are starting in July, and major tournaments, which I'll be discussing the calendar at the end, begin in September. So first, let's talk about the updates and changes going into the new season. And we still have a top X structure for those who are going to be eligible for the World Championships. There's only a few slight tweaks here. There's 5 additional juniors from North America and EU that can qualify, and in the Masters Division it's plus 10 players for North America and EU, and plus 25 slots added to the Latin America region. And once again, those who get top 4 at the 2025 World Championships receive a direct invite, as do the players who win a regional or special championship, and the top 4 players of international championships all receive direct invitations. So they are no longer considered on the leaderboard, they're chopped out, and then down goes the slot into the top 125. So if players who win a regional are also within the top 135 masters in NA, they are then chopped and it does scale down. So this is still, I think, from TPCI, the most sensible choice. The game is still growing so much right now. We've just seen a couple of seasons back to back of massive growth in the game. I think it's understandable that once again they're sticking with the top X structure. And fair enough, they've given us a few slots here and there. They're doing the best they can to add some inclusivity here where possible and a bit more fairness and balance between the regions. But at the same merit, I think you can only expect when the game is growing so crazily like this, that they have to keep it quite stringent and quite controlled with a top X rather than having a flat bar. Because even after this season, and looking at where the points ended up, if they wanted to have a really high bar, say around that 700 championship threshold for certain regions, that, as we know, in NA and EU are roughly the amount of players who can make it, there's still no guarantee that people will just be more committed to hitting a certain bar, whereas the top X still gives them the most control, that they are aware of exactly how many people will be attending the event in 2026. And as we know, it's already in San Francisco, so they have an idea of how large the venue size can be and all that other stuff. So I think we all had to kind of expect that top X would remain. And really, as we're still in this crazy period of growth where majors are still, breaking the record week to week, month to month, essentially, that it's only inevitable that they have to stay with the structure to remain under control and that they're not letting anyone down or whatever else, so they can make Worlds for those who can attend still the best experience possible. Overall, I'm happy to see a small buff, even if it is only that small number. It is still a nod that they're saying they want to make it more inclusive. They want more people to attend the World Championships, but still have the same mentality of let's control that number. Let's make it an exclusive tournament as well, as it is the only tournament on the calendar that is exclusive. And ultimately, it is the grand prize for trainers for the end of a tough season well earned. On to the championship points then. For the most part, this is all the same as well. You can see there are small buffs at regional and international championship levels in those sort of upper middle echelons here. So for regionals, top 16, top 32 and top 64 now get a small championship point buff. And at the international level, top 32, 64 and 128 also get that small bump. I do like to see this, to be honest, because there are a number of competitors in these tournaments that are on potential win-ins and then drop from a potential top 8 spot down to that sort of top 32, 64 range. So it does feel like a massive drop off. And yes, that still feels awkward in terms of prizing and whatever else, but at least you're having that small buffer of championship points in these still very respectable tournament runs for a number of players. They're still getting a decent enough reward, and it's not quite so top heavy. It's still very top heavy, don't get me wrong, and still the best prizes do get paid out to those top finishers, but also having a very decent run even from day 1 to day 2 will still be rewarded. Also, quick note, the BFLs are the same, so it's 5 limit of majors. That's the combination of regionals, special championships and international championships, and then it's a best finish limit of 4 for both league challenges and league cups. You can attend as many as you want, but the amount of points you can get will be maximized by your best 4 finishes, and then it's 5 for the majors, which is the same as the previous season. Going on to the pricing, this one's unchanged, so pause now if you want to have that screenshot, but ultimately everything is the exact same as we've known. The booster pack pricing is the same, the cash pricing is the same, the travel award structure and stipends are still the exact same, and they're even bringing back the Ace Trainer reward program. Remember, players in the 2025 season who hit 200 championship points or more will receive this Ace Trainer reward card, this promotional card, and I believe it's going to be around January 26th that we're expected to receive that prize. So still, cross your fingers, hold your breath for when that actually comes through the post, but that's going to continue into 2026. All we know right now is that once again, it's a single bar of a 200 championship point threshold, and we imagine that we're going to receive a promo. We have not had any more information on that, but the fact that it's the same, just a one single bar structure, a little disappointing because I think this still has so much potential to be filled out, to be honest with you, and have more layers than just a simple 200 bar. I would love to see it be a more convoluted ladder of different things, even if it was different stamps on promo cards or whatever else. I feel like there's so much more that can be done with the Ace Trainer rewards. But that said, I'm still thankful to see it, and it's being brought back for a second time, even though they haven't seen the sort of results of the 2025 one just yet. So I appreciate that that is something returning to us as well. Going on to some other changes then, we have Swiss and Top Cut changes, and we will actually gain one additional round of Swiss during Phase 2 of the competition. That means that if you've made it through Phase 1 and are able to continue to play those Swiss rounds, we now have that additional round. And I think this is a big deal actually, because there are major complaints with how few rounds we had on that Phase 2 of competition so frequently, and it did mean that there were those sorts of games where you win that round and you're straight away in, you lose that round and you fall out of not only top 8 contention, but down towards that sort of top 32s, top 64, sometimes even out of cash, which felt really bad for a number of players, especially at these major tournaments. So gaining that additional round before going into an asymmetrical cut feels like an excellent solution here, so that ultimately players just have more rounds to play of Pokemon, which is a great thing. We know that Phase 2 of competitions generally, for the majority of the player base, is less stringent time-wise for people. And yes, maybe it means you don't do so many Sunday evening flights home, but ultimately, for the most part, this is a big win in terms of the tournament itself, that we get to have that additional round of Swiss. For those who are still in that contention for the asymmetrical cut, they can keep on playing. For those still in contention for cash, they have an extra round to try and get there. Ultimately, more Pokemon is only a good thing, I think. Anyone who's competitive can pretty much agree with that. So that's a small thing there. But do note that now the asymmetrical cut is an X2 record or better, and it's capped at a top 16 ASIM. Previously, it was capped at a top 32 ASIM. That was just kind of messy, and it never actually came up, to be honest with you. We had a couple of 16 people completely filled out asymmetrical cuts, I believe. Generally, it's sort of sat between that 9 down to like 14, 15 range. And we saw that at the number of majors. But now I think that cap of 16, because we have that additional Swiss round anyway in Phase 2 of the competition, won't be too much of a big deal. I think mathematically it's very unlikely that the cap will ever be hit now that we have that additional Swiss round, unless we have some really large-scale tournaments coming out in the future. So I think this is a great solution overall. Generally, more players in Phase 2 of the competition have that extra round, and ASIM will feel less punishing because there will be less people vying for that contention anyway, that it's more than likely going to fit within that 16 without any worry about like a really high tie percentage then making it a crazy top 32. Now that being said, tie percentage might be something we come back to later in the video, because that might be increasing with some of the other rule changes that we have. And actually, this is the big one. This is the one that I think most people find contentious and generally can bring down the level of competitive play compared to untimed gameplay of a tournament. Of course, going into these large majors, again, as we're scaling up in size, this is one of the concessions we have to make, is that if we don't keep control of the time constraints, we're going to just have these tournaments going on till midnight, and that's not really a great thing to have, especially for the younger age divisions and whatnot. And it's a tough expectation for anyone as well. Getting people out of the venue is still part of that tournament experience, making sure it doesn't run till dawn. I know there's going to be a ton of gamers that will just say, I will play till dawn, and obviously I can put myself in that category as well, but there will be a number of people, and again, sort of tending towards a more beginner-friendly and casual audience, making it so that you get in the venue at 8 and you leave by like 7 is still a huge amount of Pokemon being played, and it's more reliable to do so if we have this new end-of-turn structure. Let's talk about it in more detail then. The +3 turn rule has been scrapped, and now we go to a best-of-3 game, 50-minute +1 turn only. Let's paint the picture then. If time is called at 50 minutes, and me and my opponent have both concluded one game, and we're playing our game 3, I'm the player whose turn it is when time is called. I get to complete my turn, then I pass it over to my opponent, and they have just one turn to conclude the game. If they can't finish the game and no winner is determined, the game is considered a draw. Now let's go back to that same scenario where I am one game ahead of my opponent, time is called, and let's just say it's their turn. They finish their turn, I have one turn. If the game is not concluded, I will be the victor as a 1-0 victor. And I say that quite facetiously because the way the game is currently played, the length of time it takes to complete games, I believe there's going to be a number of situations now where there will be 1-0 victors, and then there will be a handful of 2-0 victors, but then there will also be this handful of 1-1, and very unlikely within the 50-minute plus 1 turn to ever get a full best of 3 in. This is a big concern for me, actually. Under the previous rule set, very often a game 3 could begin and the first couple prize cards could be taken. So the +3 rule really did allow those game 3s often to conclude, or at least come down to that final turn. However, if we assume games go a similar length, I feel there's going to be a far fewer amount of games that will ever conclude in that one turn window. You really have to have zoomed through game 1, zoomed through game 2 to even have a chance of completing that game 3. So I do think there's going to be a larger proportion of ties at these tournaments. I also think there's going to be a large proportion of the player base sticking to aggressive low to the ground strategies, similar to how we see it over in Japan, where they play that best of 1. They have to get their games concluded in that best of 1 allotted time. I feel very much if you want to actually play the best of 350 minutes, you've got to play a really aggressive deck. And there could even be, I think, an adverse effect with this rule, is that players might actually end up starting to play slower and almost play as a pseudo best of 1, saying that if they can win one game in, say, 30 minutes, then even after the +1 turn, they won't be able to lose a game of game 2 based on how much time has simply expired. So I do admittedly have big concerns about this time rule change. I think generally it's something that I really hope the judges take control of, and I think they're more empowered with this rule set to be more proactive with players manipulating the clock. Because I believe with +1 turn, it's just too easy to manipulate for players who want a game not to finish. Let me know what you think about this one. I think this is by far going to be the most contentious one. I generally think, on balance, it's not ideal. I would love to see just a raw 60 minutes if they're going to give us this 10-minute overclock anyway, which, by the way, states that if the one turn is still ongoing after 10 minutes and the game still hasn't finished, that's to say that your opponent's still on their +1 turn after 10 minutes. The game is given a draw, no matter how many actions they've done. They can't end their turn by attacking, and as soon as they say, right, 10 minutes is up, they simply cut the line off at 10 minutes of overtime. If that's done, no matter whose turn it is, it's just going to be time, and it's going to be a draw from that position. I don't know, this is one where I would love to have a roundtable discussion with other people about solutions for this one, even if it starts becoming best of 1 with additional Swiss rounds, or a best of 2 structure that other card games do incorporate, or simply taking ties out of it and having X amount of prize cards or prize lead in game 2 or 3 or whatever else. I just feel like this structure is punishing for the player base generally, and I know I'm coming down pretty hard on that one, but I feel like it's tough to justify. Now that I've had my say on the time constraints, let's talk about the 2026 season that's been announced so far. Now, I have to stress, NA, you're gonna have more than 3 tournaments. Just chill. This is the first handful that you're getting, Pittsburgh, Milwaukee, and Vegas. That takes you up to November. I have to imagine you're going to have more, not only in this calendar year, but also in next calendar year. Again, I have no insider knowledge. This is just the assumption that you will have probably around those 9 to 10 tournaments like you did in the previous season. But you're just going to hold out a little bit longer to get that information. Once again, we have 3 international championships followed up by the World Championships. That is going to be LAIC in Brazil in November, EUIC in the UK in February, and NAIC back to New Orleans in June. The other event I've highlighted is Utrecht on the 16th and 17th of May. That's because it's no longer a special championships, it's now a regional championships for the first time, which means we can earn cash in this event, whereas previously it was just booster prizing, which is a nice upgrade for EU. And also shout out to the Auckland Special Championships in January. I remember in 2025, nothing was announced for Oceania, so seeing something in January for OC in the diary is always a nice thing to have. So there's a little bit of relief there, and I hope that they are given more events later on in the season. You have to imagine they're going to have something on Australia at the very least. Make sure you take that screenshot now, especially if you're a seasoned traveler and jump between the regions. This is hopefully a nice breakdown for you. Also, there was a small asterisk beside the EU and NA tournaments, as well as all of the international championships, that they will be live broadcast. Unfortunately, there was no such asterisk for the Latin American tournaments. I really hope this is another thing they look at in future to start broadcasting more of the Latin American events. There is a TPCI office opening in Mexico, so I really hope that those handful of Mexico events later down the line will get that official coverage that we look for. To be fair though, there are a couple of weekends that overlap with EU, so there's still going to be coverage on those weekends. But it does feel like if they're trying to make a parity between NA, EU and LATAM, that it's only reasonable that we start getting more coverage of these large-scale events, as they too are really rapidly growing. We know there's phenomenal players out in Latin America, and hopefully with the new offices opening up, it should logistically, in theory, become a little bit easier in the future. Let me know your thoughts of the updates of the 2026 season. My main takeaways are the +1 Swiss round is a huge win, and the 50-minute turn 1 is, well, not quite the same thing. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.